Next from Mount Prospect, GOP candidates for governor gather at a forum hosted by the Daily Herald and ABC 7 Chicago. State Senators Bill Brady and Kirk Dillard, businessman Bruce Rauner, and State Treasurer Dan Rutherford each discuss why they are the best candidate to win the general election and what issues they would focus on as governor. This runs about 1 hour.
First, categorically, what is your position about minimum wage in Illinois?
And then secondly, how will you as governor advance that position to a legislature that very likely is going to be primarily Democrats and possibly even a veto-proof Democrat legislature in both houses? How can you accomplish what it is that you'd like to accomplish? Treasurer Rutherford, how about if we start with you?
Sure. Well, first of all, I do not support lowering the state minimum wage. Secondly, I do not support raising the state minimum wage at this time. Categorically, that's my answer. Now to go, how do I intend to deal with this in the General Assembly? I understand that there are movements in the General Assembly to raise the minimum wage, and there's even referendums that are going to be on the ballot in the city of Chicago to raise it to $15. You know, as I look to negotiate in Springfield, I understand the tidal wave could well be that it could push it forward. What I would do as a governor, though, is I would work with the General Assembly to make sure that when and if that movement comes forward, what we can do to help make it better for businesses, they're going to have to absorb those costs. There's additional types of business assistance, incentives, taxes, structures, and fees that I would look to help negotiate if I see that they were going to try to go ahead and pursue this. And I'd also tell you candidly, you know, the idea of someone saying, well, I'm going to veto it, I get it. It takes 3/5 to override, and I've seen General Assemblies of the past having done that. Do I check my mic then? Go ahead, I'll go down there and I'll check the mic.
Mr. Rauner.
Yeah, I think, am I on? Sounds like I'm on. The minimum wage is a double-edged sword. We need to be thoughtful about it. Raising it can help struggling families that are struggling to make ends meet in this brutal economy. That's a good thing. Although no family can live a good life on a minimum wage. Let's not kid ourselves. Whether it's $7 or $11, a family can't live on that wage comfortably. Let's understand that. The flip side is raising the minimum wage can be counterproductive in many ways. It hurts small businesses. It can lead to further increase in unemployment. It can make small businesses close their doors or leave the state or replace workers with machines. And we can end up hurting the folks that we're trying to help. Unemployed teenagers, struggling families, low-skill, no-skill workers. So we should be very thoughtful and careful about it. In the context of a major pro-business reform package, workers' comp, tax reform, and tort reform, I can and will support an increase in the Illinois minimum wage. If we do not do that comprehensive set of reforms, I will oppose increasing the minimum wage.
And how will you be able to advance that with the legislature?
Working with the legislature will be one of my top priorities as governor. I'm a consensus builder, I'm a salesman, I'm a deal doer. I will move to Springfield, live in the mansion, work with the legislature every day they're in session to drive legislation. I will also aggressively put pro-business leaders and executives into the government as I appoint positions throughout the government, in the Labor Department, in the arbitration ranks, and we're going to get a pro-business government again.
Senator Dillard.
Thank you, Jim. We must have a minimum wage of some kind. I have voted when times were good for an increase in the minimum wage. I do not support an increase in the minimum wage at this time. What gets lost here is I do not. My vision of Illinois is to have no one living on a minimum wage or let alone raising a family on a minimum wage job. My vision of this state is to, as I said, make us a destination economy for good wage-paying jobs. And I worry that sometimes the discussion on minimum wage sets the bar way too low. But it appears we're going to have a national discussion because I think the Democratic Governors Association have decided they want to make the minimum wage an issue, and it's good. And I agree with Mr. Rauner that we need a comprehensive look at all of our business policies in the state of Illinois. So if we're going to have a discussion on minimum wage, let's think about, so if you're a small business person, you don't get the minimum wage shoved on you all at once, whether or not we index the minimum wage to inflation, and maybe we need to look at whether there's an exemption for student workers. Just to close, I last Friday met with the CEO of McDonald's Corporation, headquartered in my district. He reminded me believe they're not a minimum wage employer, but for the first 6 weeks or so, someone working there might be a minimum wage employee. And the cost per store, just as so you understand, there's a cost that gets passed down, which means there will be fewer jobs available, is about $50,000 a restaurant for the minimum wage that Governor Quinn is proposing. So you got to have one. Maybe you ought to be indexed for inflation, but nobody should be raising a family or living on a minimum wage. We need to set that bar much higher.
Thank you. And Senator Brady.
Yeah, I've called for a moratorium on raising the minimum wage. Let the federal level catch up. Let's face it, those of us who are in business that meet a payroll understand that wage is a factor of what our costs are, but it's not the only factor anymore. You've got the fear of Obamacare, you've got the fear of unemployment insurance, workers' compensation. If you live in the real world, you understand you're struggling to keep people employed and food on their table. But I think what's more important here is that our governor be consistent. When you make statements about lowering the minimum wage, you scare the heck out of families. And it's just out of touch with reality. When you make statements about raising the minimum wage, you scare the heck out of businesses. We know that the last time we raised the minimum wage, we saw the biggest increase in unemployment the state has seen in recent history. We need someone who's going to be a leader. When you're inconsistent on these issues and not firm, you give the business community even more reason not to reinvest in Illinois. So we need a governor who's going to be consistent on this issue, who's thoughtful about it, who understands both sides of it, and will lead on this issue. And I believe firmly that I can convince the legislature that they need to leave the minimum wage just where it's at if we want to grow jobs in Illinois.
Gentlemen, let's talk pension reform. And I want to do it a little bit differently. I want to ask each of you an individual question because this isn't a debate, and I just want to sound you out on some opinions about pension reform. And I know a bill was passed by the General Assembly and signed by the governor, but the courts have to weigh in. So this is far from a done deal. I want to begin with Senator Dillard. You voted against Senate Bill 1, the pension reform bill. Your running mate, Jill Tracy, voted for it. Where does the Dillard-Tracy team stand on pension reform?
Jill was part, along with Senator Brady, of the group that worked on pension reform. So I believe she will tell you she felt an obligation to go with the proposal that was out there. Kirk Dillard and Jill Tracy are not always going to agree, just like I don't agree with my wife, as she'll tell you on some issues. But the pension bill, as a rank and file member, I thought, number one, was drafted over Thanksgiving. It was shoved on our desk right after Thanksgiving, cynically the day after the filing period, to see who our opponents would be. And we were given, and if I've learned one thing from Obamacare, it's when they put a bill that's about that thick, 350 pages on your desk, you ought to read it before you vote on it, and we didn't have that opportunity. We didn't have an opportunity from people who opposed it, either on the right side, like the Illinois Policy Institute, or on the left side, like a retired teacher in downstate Illinois, in the state Senate, to really have a hearing for rank and file members. But Charles, the real reason I opposed it is I believe, and Governor Quinn will have $1.3 billion worth of savings. And yes, we need major pension reform, but I thought we should have required the governor to pay down the old outstanding bills with the $1.3 billion in savings and give us a plan to roll back the Democratic Party's 67% income tax increase. And I've known Pat Quinn since I was 12 years old. He grew up in my neighborhood. He's going to use that money. He's going to use that money to expand the government, and we will be in a deeper hole. And then last but not least, I believe, and it's not just me, I just read that Ann Lucene, a great constitutional law professor, perhaps the best in the state from the John Marshall Law School, who was at the Constitutional Convention in 1970, said that this bill is of dubious constitutionality.
Thank you, Senator. Go counterpoint, Senator Brady, because you were a member of the conference committee, of course, that helped write the revised Senate Bill 1. Why is it a good deal?
Well, as I said before, this is the toughest vote. If you voted for this, it took real courage because you had to go back to your constituents who had paid every dime into the system over their careers and tell them that you were going to change the rate and growth of their pension. But the fact of the matter, it was either that or we cut classroom spending and other things. We had a real reality check here that we need to deal with. And it really took courage on the part of the members of the General Assembly in a bipartisan way to do this. You can't use the excuse you didn't know it was in the bill. We are paid to examine bills, and everything that was in the bill had been discussed and drafted over the last 2 or 3 years. But meaningful reform, $160 billion in meaningful reform. Is it a perfect piece of legislation? No. I actually sponsored a different bill, which I would have preferred. But when you work in a bipartisan way and a Democratic-controlled General Assembly, and you've got no leadership from the governor's office, you have to work with your colleagues. We brought the Senate Democrats from $40 billion up to $160 billion, really $190, because under current law we'd have a $30 billion liability in 30 years, and now we'll have zero. This will move government spending for pensions from over 25% to less than 20%. Some people say it's unconstitutional. In fact, all three of these had made comments that it's unconstitutional. I don't believe it is. But you know what? You can't save real money if you don't test it. And to say that you're against it without supporting something or passing something, I think is illegitimate. We needed someone who could step forward. This is a good bill. Perfect? No. But it's the right bill for the right time. And if we would have delayed this action, the Democrats would have had an absolute argument to make permanent the temporary tax increase.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Brady. Treasurer Rutherford, did this debate in the Senate make you long for your old job as a legislator? How would you have voted on this bill?
You know, well, to answer your question directly, no, it did not have me long to return with my friends, though it would have been nice collegiality. And I understand the complications, and I respect the gentlemen and women that engaged in this, but over the Thanksgiving weekend, I actually did analyze what was publicly available to us. The document had not been released yet, and I had the chance to look at the various legal briefing memos that had come out. I do not believe this bill was constitutional. And a fair question then is, all right, Mr. Treasurer, if you were governor, what would you do? Number one, I would be the one negotiating the deal. If you recall what happened this process, Pat Quinn was nowhere near this thing. He abdicated that responsibility to the General Assembly and just sat back and waited to see what would come on his desk. You recall I told you in my introduction who I am? I negotiated contracts for a living. That's how I put myself through a successful career at the ServiceMaster Corporation. And one thing I learned about negotiating contracts, inclusive of this kind of a contract, is put it all on the table. Someone's going to say, well, would you have looked at the COLA? Put it on the table. Would you look at the retirement age? Put it on the table. You know, would you look at additional contributions? All of these things that if you answer one singularly at a forum like this today, it's going to be contingent upon another part of that contract. You put together comprehensive and then negotiate it out. And make sure that you read those two sentences in the Illinois Constitution. And that's where I think the problem for this bill will be. Run it through the courts. I'm not a litigious kind of guy, but we'll know here in a reasonable amount of time as to whether the Supremes will rule it constitutional or not.
And finally, Mr. Rauner, the Senate Minority Leader, a Republican, said it was unconscionable that you lobbied against this bill behind the scenes. And I have heard you say that you're against any defined benefit style pension program or retirement program for state workers. Can you clarify where you are on this bill and whether or not you oppose all defined benefit retirement programs for state workers?
Let's talk about the pension issue. It's a defining issue in our state's history. That pension bill was a Band-Aid on an open wound. Did not solve the problem, and it's going to give bipartisan cover to allowing the Democrats to leave the tax hike in place and push for a graduated income tax. It's wrong. And you can look to see where people came out on that bill by who takes money from the government union bosses. Let's be crystal clear. The Democrats have sold out to the government union bosses. Many of my fellow Republicans have sold out to the government union bosses. You can look it up. I'm the only one in this race who hasn't taken a nickel from them. This is a defining issue in our state, and it's a bipartisan problem. Even Franklin Roosevelt, the powerful Democrat, the most pro-union president in American history, was against government unions because he said they're organized against the public good, and he was right. And working families in Illinois are suffering because of the power of the government union bosses. We have to stand up on principle for this. The right answer, the constitutional answer, that doesn't need a constitutional amendment, is to freeze the current system. Don't take away historical benefits, but for future work, have people be in a defined contribution plan.
401ks.
That style plan.
Thank you.
Okay, that leads naturally to the next question. I think almost everyone agrees that the pension agreement didn't solve Illinois' economic problems, and in fact, there was a report this week that showed that it may not even produce as much savings as was believed first. So we've already gone through, Governor Quinn has cut Medicaid substantially. We've gone through years of sort of a mentality of cutting in Springfield. What do we do now? What would you as governor do? And again, working with a legislature that may be from the opposite party, how would you go about achieving what you would like to, and with the economy and, and with the budget for Illinois? Mr. Rutherford, how about if you start?
Well, I'm not sure that Medicaid is actually taken care of with regards to Governor Quinn's actions. I mean, there is a very, very sensitive portion about where we are in regards to eligibility and fraud and so forth. I don't think we've gone what we should and could do in that. And as I introduce myself to you, how I think and who I am. As the treasurer of the state of Illinois, my first fiscal year in office, I cut my general revenue budget by 2%. My second full fiscal year in office, I additionally cut my general revenue budget by 3%. I am now in my third full fiscal year as your state treasurer, and we will be introducing to the General Assembly our budget, which cuts our general revenue budget by an additional 5%. In less than one term in office, I've been able to cut my general revenue budget by 10% while maintaining a high standard of performance. From the business perspective, I take an analysis of our unclaimed property. We just announced a couple days ago that the 2013 dollar amount of returned in claims and assets to Public of Illinois has reached astronomical. In fact, it's a 70% growth in assets returned since I became in office. The Bright Start 529 program, our college savings program, is off the charts in performance. We increased assets by $1 billion in 1 year. And all of this is while cutting within the operation. So I think to answer your question directly, I'm going to do the same kind of thing as I've done as a state treasurer in the office of governor. I'm going to be looking at every agency, asking them to come through and do a performance review, and we're going to have the same kind of successes that we've enjoyed in the treasurer's office.
Senator Brady, how about you? How would you address the Illinois economy?
Well, the first step was pension reform. It will save $1.2 billion, at least $160 billion over the 30 years, and we had to have that to argue that we needed to make sure this income tax sunset. Or the Democrats, you're naive to think they wouldn't have used that as an argument to extend it and make it permanent. My argument is to make sure that does sunset. Make the pension payment, let the tax sunset. Then we've got $7.5 billion in unpaid bills that need to be paid off no less than over 4 years. That'll take about $1 billion, at least a year, to bring them relatively current. After that, you've got to work with the legislature. These are men and women who are elected to represent the people of Illinois. And we need to work with them to redefine what our highest priorities are. I happen to believe we can save a lot of money by reconstructing a Medicaid system that works for those who are entitled, but gets those who are not entitled off the rolls. I also think there's a lot of other things we can do by reducing overtime pay in the Department of Corrections, working with unions to better manage state resources in our state. But the fact of the matter is we have to have a governor who's got the discipline to not allow the legislature to spend more money than it has, and a governor who's got the discipline to manage that spending. Frankly, you could argue that the legislature passed balanced budgets in the last few years, but the governor didn't manage them, which is what led us to the huge unpaid bills. But the real key is these policies have to be driven to create jobs. The 200,000 jobs that we lost, in the last 5.5 years. Those cost us billions of dollars in revenue each and every year, not to mention billions of dollars in expenditures to help fund the necessary needs of those families. We've got to put ourselves on a path of job creation, bringing revenues in through job formation, not taxation.
Thank you. Senator Dillard.
I'm going to do it just as I did as Jim Edgar's chief of staff, where we inherited $1 billion deficit, left $1.5 billion surplus in the state treasury. You got to focus in on Medicaid. It's your state's largest expenditure. Pensions, I agree with Senator Brady, is crucial. Medicaid dwarfs the size of the $1.3 billion in savings that you're going to get from the pension bill. I've managed Medicaid before. The New York Times, a paper that's a little to the left of the Daily Herald in philosophy, says that 10% of all Medicaid is fraud. And as Speaker Newt Gingrich, the former Speaker of the United States House, says on the banquet circuit all the time, and man, can you imagine what it's like in a place like Illinois? You've got to manage Medicaid. We must purge our rolls. Governor Quinn, Governor Blagojevich, add all these people to Medicaid. We have, according to the CBS station in Champaign-Urbana, nearly half of the people that are on Medicaid in Illinois, again, we spend more on Medicaid than we do on education, are ineligible to be there. I proposed a constitutional amendment. If you want a game changer that will really change the culture of Springfield, Jim Edgar and Kirk Dillard are not going to be there with their line item veto all the time. If you want a game changer constitutional amendment, it is to force the legislature to pass a balanced budget or they don't get paid. So I've been there before. You've got to grow your economy. That's the best way to put money in the state treasury, but you must manage the Medicaid program. And I've been there, and I've done it with the Democrat legislature, forced Mike Madigan to do things it's not in his DNA to do, and make the General Assembly live within its means, and I've done it.
Mr. Rauner.
We need a comprehensive set of pro-business reforms in Illinois. That's workers' comp reform, that's tax reform, that's tort reform, that's labor regulation reform, that's environmental restriction reform, that's unemployment insurance reform. It's a list of about a dozen things we need to change. And there are 3 ways to get the change. One is by putting in fundamentally strong, competent leaders in the government, in the key positions, in the key departments, and staff people properly who are really pro-business and pro-growth. Number 2 is to use the power of the governorship through executive order. The governorship in Illinois is very powerful if you're willing to use it to do the right thing. Mitch Daniels, who in my opinion was the best governor in America for 8 years when he turned Indiana around, he used executive order to fundamentally transform his state, and he recruited business superstars from around Indiana to state capital and had them put in charge of the government and ran it like a business. I will do exactly that. The third way to do that changes is through legislation. I'll be in Springfield working with the legislature, grinding, working, selling, cajoling, building alliances. I get stuff done. I solve problems and figure it out. And we're gonna have an agenda, and we're gonna drive it hard. And I know how to negotiate and drive a hard bargain. I don't need a job. I'm not looking for a political career, and I know how to negotiate. And we've got a lot of negotiating leverage. The crowd down there, I've never seen anybody like me. It's going to be a lot of fun, and it's going to be very interesting, and we're going to drive big change.
I'm a suburbanite with very strong downstate roots, married in a farming community in central Illinois, Western Illinois University, very active there still today. And my running mate, Jill Tracy, grew up in southern Illinois. I will run well in the city of Chicago, run well among African Americans and ethnic groups that our party needs to do better among. And I'm married to the ultimate suburban mom who drives a 5-year-old Chrysler minivan. I believe, Charles, I am, in terms of profile, the most electable Republican, but I'm tested and I'm prepared. With respect to Mr. Rauner, I think that the state has a history of not electing people who somehow appear out of touch. And I'm not putting down Mr. Rauner's incredible wealth, but there will be questions about how he uses his money, how he uses his influence, how he's made his money. Crane's Chicago business yesterday, Charles, said that Mr. Rauner needs to ask and answer why he paid Stuart Levine, the mastermind of the Blagojevich corruption ring, $25,000 a month while Bruce hawked business from the Illinois teacher retirement system, of which Mr. Levine was a member. So, Charles, my comment was, you were at the press availability in response to him clouding his child.
we're way past your time, Senator.
We have to
But I
move
will just
on
tell
to-
you, it's the constant drip, drip, drip of questions that I think will wash away in a flood any chance that our party has if Bruce is the nominee of defeating Pat Quinn in the fall.
Mr. Rauner, can you win? I mean, with that baggage?
If it's going to be beat up Bruce time, can I go last?
Well, that depends.
And I didn't ask the question. Well, I didn't start.
It is, you know,
He didn't ask the question. I mean, but I,
all right, you want me to go next? Or should, let him get a few shots and then let me respond? How about if I go last?
well, it's not a debate, but I mean,
Okay,
I think
okay.
can you win despite?
Absolutely, we're going to win. I'm going to win this race. The reason I'm being attacked is I've got a message that's resonating with the voters, and we're winning the race. We've got 2,000 volunteers. We've got a great ground game. We've raising a ton of money. We've got volunteers, and we've got folks who believe in the message. We are going to win. And I've had Democrats come up to me. I've even had Democrats in the legislature come to me and say, Bruce, we need a leader in Springfield who will take the arrows, because we won't take the arrows. We need the job. We want a political career. You're tough. You're independent. You can't be bribed, bought, or intimidated or influenced. You can get stuff done. We need you in Springfield. And you know what? As I travel the state, and I love campaigning, it's a blast. I love campaigning. I've never done it before, but I've been a traveling salesman my whole life, and it's really fun. And we're going to win this race. We're going to be bombed every day. I'm a target-rich environment. I'll be bombed every day, and we're ready, because we know everything they could possibly say, and there's no there. There's no basis for legitimate attack.
Well, Senator Brady, I mean, you've had a shot at Pat Quinn, and you didn't win, and you've been quoted saying that Mr. Rauner is trying to buy the race.
Well, as the only candidate who's running a general election against Pat Quinn, I think I know a little something about it. Yeah, I lost by a couple thousand votes, but we won 98 counties in a state that's 40% Democrat, 30% Republican, while I was running against a populist demagogue in a honeymoon period. But we've learned about what you need to do to win. And one of the best advantages I have that these three gentlemen don't have is I've got a base of support of 1.8 million votes nearly who voted for me in the last election. These guys will be starting with fewer than 200,000 votes at best. And it's very hard to go from that level when you're running for governor. I've had $5 million in negative ads. And Bruce, to be candid with you, you don't know the difference between running quarterback for Joliet Catholic and Notre Dame. I mean, when you move, if you were fortunate enough to move from the primary to the general, it's the big leagues. And you're not going to be able to buy the airwaves. The Democrats will have money to counteract you. And the fact of the matter is, we are a state that is rooted in corruption. We're a state that has been challenged by pay-to-play politics. I applaud you, although I disagree with your effort on clouding your daughter into Peyton Prep. I applaud you for coming clean on it. But you have to come clean and transparent on this $25,000 a month contract with Stuart Levine, who voted to award you over $50 million in state teachers' pension contracts. I mean, you can't avoid it. You can't advertise your way out of it, Bruce. And just candidly speaking, as one Republican to another who wants to make sure a Republican wins, you've got to be candid.
Treasurer Rutherford, what do you think?
I'm the only guy on this stage that's won a statewide office as a Republican in the state of Illinois. Now, there's something pretty powerful to be said about that. It's not about how many counties you win. It's about the population, the vote that you win by. I've had 1.8 million votes, too. Okay, let me tell you. I ran for Secretary of State in 2006, and I lost. I ran against the highest vote-getting Democrat in the state of Illinois that won 102 counties. And when I ran for Secretary of State, he didn't win 102 counties. I won 22, and I was winning counties by over 75%. He did not get 1 million votes in Cook County. For the first time in the history, he'd run in statewide and in the county. In 2010, down ballot state treasurer, which Republicans don't win. In 40 years, only 3 Republicans had ever been elected comptroller or treasurer. Lolita Diedrichson, George Lindbergh, and Judy Bar-Topinka. I ran, I won. My opponent was an African-American, female, city of Chicago, Democrat, with an Irish last name. All right, think about how hard that is to win in the city of Chicago, and I'm a nice white guy, Republican from Central Illinois. If you don't get 20% of the city of Chicago, you will not win a statewide race. Think about who I was running against. I got 22. Our Republican candidate for governor got 18. I won, he lost. There were 4 people on the ballot, a Democrat, a Republican, a Green, and a Libertarian. I got 50% of the vote. Down ballot, not supposed to win.
Hey, you convinced me, but I think we got to move on.
And I got 66,000 more votes as state treasurer, down ballot, with 83,000 people voting in the race than Pat Quinn got as governor.
Thank you,
I'm the
Treasurer.
only guy that's been able to win in Illinois.
Thank you, Trey.
Thank you.
I did convince you? It's public, guys. Charles Thomas has endorsed Rutherford.
I'm not sure I heard that. But we got a little bit of a late start, and we're running a little behind, but we want to take some questions from the audience. We've had some workers' compensation. Some reforms were approved a few years ago in workers' comp, but there's still a lot of talk about what needs to be done in order to get Illinois' workers' comp situation back to where it should be. I would like to know, and the questioners would like to know, where would you like to get workers' comp to be? What do you see as workers' comp reform, and how do you achieve that? And Mr. Rauner, how about if we start with you?
Well, this is a fairly easy one because workers' comp reform was done in Illinois about 2 or 3 years ago, just the way pension reform was done in Illinois now. It's baloney. We are not delivering results. We didn't do real workers' comp reform, and Republicans got sucked into voting for that bad bill just like they got sucked into the bad pension bill. We need major workers' comp reform. Now, I'll take the next 45 seconds of my answer time to deal with Stu Levine, because I think that everybody here deserves to hear. This guy Levine, I don't know. I've never met him. I've never interacted with him. He had a company that was a subsidiary of a company that we had a minority investment in along with other venture capital firms. I didn't know it. I wasn't on the board. Never interacted with him. Don't know the guy. And apparently, he was also on the Teachers Retirement Board in Illinois. I don't know that. I don't know their board members. And to say that I somehow used him or bribed him to get teachers business, oh my goodness, it's pure baloney. We've worked for the teachers retirement system for 30 years in Illinois. And while the Illinois pensions were generating 7%, we did more than double that. We get the business because we produce results. Simple. End of story.
Senator Dillard, how do you see workers' comp reform? What should be done, and how would you make it happen?
When our workers' comp costs are 3 to 7 times higher than the other surrounding Midwestern states, we have a problem. You've got to go at something called causation or apportionment, and we need that kind of standard in Illinois. And I'm like Senator Brady and Treasurer Rutherford. I am a citizen legislator. What pays my mortgage is I happen to be a tort defense lawyer and have represented manufacturers for 27 or 28 years with the same law firm. My firm happens to be one of Texas's major law firms, so I do a lot of work around and see manufacturing in a variety of different capacities. Talked to Governor Perry in Texas and know a little bit about this. But Illinois' workers' compensation costs just completely, especially from a manufacturing perspective, make us uncompetitive with the rest of the Midwest. And what does causation mean in a nutshell? If you are injured on the job, you got to prove that your injury didn't come from a softball game over the weekend. It came from actually repetitive or a trauma in the workplace. And if we were to do that standard, that would be a great start. But we clearly must reduce the cost of workers' compensation in Illinois, or we will not be competitive at all with the other states around us.
Senator Brady?
Yeah. To Mr. Rauner's claim that this is like pension, again, I'll say pension reform is meaningful and real, but workers' compensation reform was meaningful and real. Was it perfect? No. But he ought to look at who supported the bill. every chamber of commerce, every business organization, everybody who makes a workers' compensation premium payment, like I do, supported the legislation. Do we need to do more? Absolutely. But you don't turn the backs on the people who are providing jobs in Illinois just because your ego gets in the way of the bill that's in front of us. It was meaningful reform. We need to do more. Senator Dillard alluded to the fact. It needs to be causation. And as governor, I'll make sure that happens. We also need to redefine the way we deal with health care. You think about it, we pay for health care at the automobile level, we pay for it at the normal health care level, and at the workers' compensation level. As a person who sits on a hospital board, I know what we charge. It's wrong. And we need to deal with health care costs and causation. As governor, I'll provide that. Back to the Stuart Levine thing. Mr. Ronner, I just find it hard to believe that you presented yourself in front of a board and didn't know who Stuart Levine was, the most notorious guy. And do you think it's really ethical that your sub firm paid him $25,000 a month and he voted for you to get more money?
Senator, let's try to keep on the topic.
Mr. Ronner went to the issue, so I thought I could.
Okay. Mr. Rutherford, workers' comp.
Workers' comp. May have just witnessed part of it up here. The process for legislating, when you have Democrats and Republicans and upstate and downstate, liberals and conservatives, is a process of consensus. I have voted on bills that weren't exactly like I wanted. If I was king of the forest, things would be different. But a governor is not king of the forest. You have to work with people to bring about a consensus to have any movement to be beneficial. Now, as your governor, I will be working to have, and I concur with my Senate colleagues, the causation portion. I'm going to work to that. But we've tried it before and we couldn't get it through. We're going to keep working at it. And I'm going to have a relationship, not a hammer and shake relationship, with the members of the General Assembly. A part of what I have the ability to do, though, as your governor on this very important question, is I will be appointing the chairman of the Workers' Compensation Review Board. I will be appointing the commissioners. I will be appointing the arbitrators. So think about a gentleman like myself, a businessman who I introduced myself at the beginning of your program. The kind of people I will be appointing must follow the law and they must follow the rules. But they will be people that will be looking at it with the vision of where we need to help move Illinois forward.
Thank you. Charles.
You know, this is from the great minds think alike category from our audience, because this is a question that we talked about asking during the time we had, and that is, what can you, as governor of Illinois, do to keep big businesses with many employees from holding the state hostage with threats to leave if concessions or incentives aren't given? I want to start with Senator Brady.
First thing you've got to do is move from being on the defensive to getting on the offensive. You know, I know it in business. When you lose a client, it's tough to get them back. So you can't be losing clients. The biggest problem we have is we have the highest corporate tax rate in the country. We have the highest personal individual income tax rate. That's just why our focus has got to be to make sure that we let that tax rate fall off and we put a plan together to eliminate the personal income tax. As I said earlier, Texas and Florida, two of the top 5 states in the nation in terms of the forecast for job creation and growth, have no personal income tax. We got to get out of the dark ages. We've got to stop just muddling in the mud, and we've got to realize that the economy's changing. If we want to keep the young, vibrant workforce here in the Chicago metropolitan area and the rest of the state of Illinois, we've got to right our ship and move us to the forefront of policies. That's what I'll do as governor. And then when we get that done, I'm going to market the hell out of this state. We have more to offer than any other state in the nation, rooted in our agricultural base, our infrastructure. You think now about a soil, what we have lying below the soil and energy resources. I think that could be the next generation of manufacturing because of low-cost energy.
Thank you. Senator Dillard.
I look forward to the day when no one has to be given an incentive to be here in the capital of the Midwest. This state, again, must improve its business climate. And I ask you, go look at my website, my 30 tips to a thriving economy, and my plan to make us a destination economy. I've dealt with these issues. I said in my opening statement I was the sponsor that brought Boeing here and sponsored the incentives that brought Boeing from Seattle to here. Navistar, a success story in my district in Lisle and Naperville, a good one where most of the jobs came from the state of Indiana. The grass is not always greener on the other side. But I do care about small businesses and have just attended in the last 10 days 3 small business conferences because I worry about the small businesses who don't have the clout to get those tax breaks that the big business guys who write the $250,000 or $500,000 checks to Bruce Rauner, they don't have that kind of clout that Boeing or ADM or these other guys do. And I worry about the small businesses day in and day out as well. But we need to have a comprehensive climate change. The state of Illinois needs to be open for business again, both small and large. And this is the capital of the Midwest, folks. And nobody should have to be paid to stay here or move here.
Mr. Rauner.
We've become the state of special deals. We've become the state of corporate welfare, and we've got to end that. We need a level playing field that's attractive for all businesses. Low-level taxes, attractive workers' comp, attractive labor regulations, attractive fundamental reduced cost and burden on business, and level for all businesses. We have to stop getting caught up on what our corporate income tax rate is because it's high, but you got to look at the corporations who pay no income tax. We're fooled by sound bites. We've got to go deep on our entire tax system and our tax code and compare ourselves to the well-run states and find out where we're competitive and where we're not and move to be competitive with comprehensive reform. I will push pro-business reforms at the state level, and then I will get on my horse and I'll travel the nation and I'll travel the world recruiting companies to Illinois. Once I change the environment here, I'm going to live on the road. I'm a salesman, I'm a business recruiter, and I'm a relocator. I've done it for 30 years. We can be very attractive for business once we change the environment, and then I'm going to go bring them here. And I'll tell you, to bring them here, I'm probably going to have to cut a few deals on some taxes or some special deals to get them here. That's what good governors do. They get that done. We shouldn't have to do that here for our companies as a corporate welfare deal because they're here. To bring people, we might have to do a little bit of that, and I will do it. I will go to battle to make our state the #1 location for companies to come and invest and grow and create jobs.
Treasurer Rutherford.
Thank you. 3 things. Number 1, I will be appointing the director of every single state agency, board, and commission in this state. And when I do that, they have to be the talented individuals with the expertise in energy and aging, agriculture, nuclear safety, whatever their agency may be, but they must sit before me in the governor's office on the 2nd floor of the Illinois State Capitol, look me in the eye before I sign their authorization paper. That they will do everything within their authority and power to create a job and retain a job, not be the bureaucratic barrier to a job. If you talk to our corporate world and our small businesses, where our own Illinois government is the barrier, is a big problem. Number 2, my lieutenant governor will be in charge, Steve Kim, a business lawyer, an immigrant to America. He will be in charge of the governor's office of job creation and retention, which will be the ombudsman office for companies, small businesses, when they have out and try to special legislate for themselves. We're about changing the EDGE tax credit for corporate benefits to their income and moving it to payroll. If it's good enough for them, it's good enough for all companies. I'm going to be a governor that's going to have a level playing field, that if we're going to change if we're going to change tax legislation, it needs to be applicable for a broad base, not just a select few.
Thank you. We've got time for one more question from the audience, and after this question, then we'll have some time for closing statements. But this is a question that follows along with some of the same themes that we've been going after, and I will emphasize that there are exclamation points all over it, so I'm sure you're going to find that it's one that people care about. Illinois' economy and business needs good infrastructure, roads and pipes. We're way behind in taking care of Illinois' infrastructure, but given all of the other things that we've talked about with what the state has to do, what can you do about it? Mr. Rauner, how about if we start with you?
One of the most important priorities for spending after education is infrastructure. We can't be a world-class economy with major economic growth without world-class infrastructure. We're the heart of the transportation network for the United States. We need world-class roads, bridges, airports, rail, locks and dams, world class. Then we've got to come up with the money to do it. The politicians in Springfield today are siphoning off our transportation funds and spending them on other priorities. We should keep our priorities on our infrastructure. And where we're struggling, while we're coming out of our mismanagement phase that we've been going through for 15 years, struggling financially, we should come up with creative public-private partnerships to finance some of our infrastructure projects, and I'll be aggressively, creatively negotiating some of those as well. We need to invest in our infrastructure aggressively to get major economic growth.
Senator Dillard.
Thank you. We need to do a number of things with respect to our infrastructure. First of all, I've been a legislator, even, and I've discussed this with Mr. Schlesser at editorial boards of the Daily Herald, that has voted for all of the capital or infrastructure, no matter how tough the revenues were that would pay for that infrastructure. I've always espoused that Illinois is a state that has two gas taxes. We have a regular gas tax, and then we have a sales tax on gas, and that is a tax on top of a tax. We should take the sales tax on gas, which is put into the state's general fund, and move it over for specific road and bridge projects, as well as mass transportation like Metro. The operating engineers, whom some have said, wow, why does a Republican have a union, a private sector union, support him as strongly as they support Kirk Dillard? Supports me because they know I am someone who has always been laser focused on infrastructure improvement. That's what they do. They're bulldozer operators and others. And they know that I am the best person with the best plan. And we have billions of dollars of pent up infrastructure needs in this state that must be taken care of. But groups like the operating engineers, the men and women who actually build our roads, support my candidacy because they know I have the right vision and the courage to do what's necessary to improve the infrastructure of this state. And that includes places like O'Hare Airport, where I've made difficult votes to keep O'Hare the economic engine for this part of Illinois.
Thank you. And Treasurer Rutherford.
Well, just for the benefit of all, the way we get our infrastructure built is through bond issuances for long-term debt from the state to then pay for the brick and the mortar, the highways, the bridges, and the airports. And that necessitates itself a revenue stream. But the other side of that is also where you are in regards to your expenses. And as the Treasurer of Illinois, I probably see this with a better clarity than many. The bond issuance that Illinois has been doing over the recent years, because our bond rating is so low, again, simple terms, we've got a poor credit score. We are paying much, into the tune of tens of millions of dollars more in interest and insurance on our bonds because our low credit score. So one thing as your governor, I intend to work through the process to help get Moody's Standard and Fitch to help raise our credit score, which then means more of those dollars will go to brick, mortar, and highways. Another point that I'd like to point out is that as your governor, I will not allow or tolerate diversions from the road fund. It is easy for assemblies of the past to go and say, well, we're going to pay for part of this out of the road fund. One more time, one less dollar to brick, mortar, and highway out there. And I think the third thing I'd like to say to you as your governor, I'm going to be a strong leader, and I'm not going to be shy. When the time comes and we're going to have debates about whether we should continue the type of a gas structure we have on gallons or should it go to mileage, that's going to be a part of a debate amongst other things that we're going to have to look at to see what we can do to put the resources to infrastructure improvement.
Senator Brady.
One of the big problems has been governors over the past have passed a big bond infrastructure program where we spend a ton of money and then we go dry. And what happens is when you spend a ton of money, you don't get the good bang for your buck because you're paying more because of the huge influx. And then when you go dry, workers are sitting there without a job and the roads and the bridges are dilapidated. We need someone who will take what we do in business, and that's about a 30-year approach to what our infrastructure needs are. What do we need in the long term? And then we need a consistent source of funding that will spread those improvements over the 30 years so that people are employed consistently, businesses know what they can rely on, and the public can know that their infrastructure is going to be maintained. Now, how do we fund that? Well, Senator Dillard's right. I sponsored legislation that would have eliminated the sales tax on gas, made Illinois gas prices more competitive, and given that money to the road fund. We also need a governor who will have the discipline, as Senator Rutherford said, not to divert the road funds. I commissioned an audit that showed that Governor Quinn was diverting over half of the money that goes into the road fund into non-road projects. Again, it comes back to discipline. It comes back to leadership and planning. As governor of this state, I'll provide that type of planning. But we can't have a governor who gets newly elected and decides he wants to buy off everybody with one huge, huge infrastructure plan that lasts 5 years, and then where are we after that?
Thank you. And with that, we're ready to close. So we have 2 minutes for closing statements, and we'll go in reverse alphabetical order this time. So Treasurer Rutherford, if you'll start.
All right, I don't want y'all to think I'm being repetitive, but Charles Thomas's question was an excellent one. I'd like to add even further to it why I'm going to be the nominee and how I can be the guy that will beat Pat Quinn. And I hope I don't talk myself out of your support when I get done with this thing. In 2010, there were 3.8 million people that voted in the general election. 83,000 less people voted for office of treasurer. I got 66,000 more votes than Pat Quinn. You look at this as the city of Chicago and what we need to do there, the demographics, and to have been a Republican, a reasonable Republican, and I think that's an operative sentence we need to think about, a reasonable Republican to prepare to run in the general election. Having been to the city of Chicago and the gay and lesbian community and the Jewish community, the African American community, the Latino community, the Polish community, the Serbian community, having been one who's been able to draw votes out of the city of Chicago in a general election as is going to be essential to win. And with all respect to the suburban urban area, having been to 102 counties, and having been to 102 counties not for the first time just because I'm now running for governor. Bottom line is, I've done it before. I'm the one guy up here that's been able to win a statewide race as a Republican. If we want to change the governor's office, I need to be your nominee. And as my close, I don't see all of you over here, but I'm kind of looking you in the eye vicariously as I go around the room. I would appreciate, seriously, if you would consider voting for me to be the Republican nominee for governor. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Rauner.
I am very, very excited and honored to go to work for you all. We are going to win the primary. We're winning now, and we've got great momentum. Our message is resonating, and we are going to win the general too. We've got major Democrats coming to me and saying, Bruce, we need you. We need a turnaround. Quinn's a disaster. We need him gone. We're going to help you. African American leaders in Chicago are helping. Latino leaders in Chicago are helping. And in Rockford and in East St. Louis, we're working the entire state. I'm getting out there and shaking hands and working it hard. We're going to win both. Quinn's the worst governor in America. He's got the track record to prove it. And I'm going to make sure every voter knows it every week. And it's going to take a lot of money to beat Quinn. He's going to have government union boss money and trial lawyer money. I'm the one person who's a master at fundraising. I'm going to have the resources for us as Republicans to pound the stuffing out of Quinn in this general election. And we got to do it, and we are going to win. Now, and this has been a little bit of beat up Brucey morning, and that's okay. I've worked hard not to attack my opponents. I do not attack my opponents. I attack Quinn. But the reason I want to be clear why I'm running. Illinois is full of conflict of interest. I am the only person in this race who hasn't taken government union money. It's a big deal. Kirk, you've taken hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars. Dan, you've taken a lot, more than $100,000 too.
That is not correct, Bruce Rauner.
It is, but we'll deal with that.
No, Bruce Rauner, don't do that. That is not correct. I pulled my D2s. You have no right to put out false information on me.
Okay, we'll deal with that another time. So, and in the states that have done true pension reform, the treasurer led the analysis, led the policy recommendations, led the negotiations. You've been AWOL. The reason I'm
You know what, I'm not going to put up with this, Bruce. Gina Raimondo of Rhode Island has a different role as treasurer than the investment officer of Illinois. I don't mind you putting out facts out there, but you do not misrepresent and put false statements out here. Through this entire day today, Mr. Rauner, I have never once said your name in a negative nor attacked you. Do not put out false information about me, Mr. Rauner.
Okay, we'll have time over the race to deal with that. And Bill, you've run You've been running for governor for 9 years. You've lost twice. I helped you raise millions of dollars last time. You lost to the worst governor in America, and we've gotten a mess as a result. We have to stop losing, and we have to start acquiescing to the government union bosses. It's a conflict of interest. We're going to win, and good Democrats know it too, because the government union bosses are killing jobs, and they're shredding the social services safety net. Our message is going to be powerful. We're going to win.
Senator Dillard.
Thank you. I've told you I have my vision of Illinois, which is to make us a destination economy for people that create jobs. I have got the best running mate, a businesswoman in Jill Tracy. And Jill will have a couple of key roles in my administration. She's going to have a title called the Repealer. She's going to go throughout this state talking to small businesses, big businesses, and farmers to get rid of all of the superfluous regulations and over-regulations we have in government, and we are going to regulate at the speed of business, not at the speed of government in Illinois. We're going to have a comprehensive panel that's going to go through every tax, top to bottom. It will have Taxpayer Federation members on it. It will have people like Doug Whitley, the outgoing president of the Chamber of Commerce in Illinois, who was a member of Governor Edgar's cabinet, and it will have very few politicians. And we are overtaxed and we are overregulated. I have never voted for a general tax increase. No state has ever borrowed or taxed its way into prosperity. I have a best-in-class education program. It goes hand in glove with job creation. And last but not least, look at my career. I will not tolerate. I was the first sponsor of ethics changes in the state that passed in more than 25 years, the continued clout and the cadence of corruption in a state that I love dearly. I have a 10-year-old and a 12-year-old child, and that's one of the reasons I'm running for governor. Aside from my unique experience in state government and an ability to get a Democrat legislature proven to live within its means. I want my children to be 10 minutes from me and have a job when they graduate from college, not 10 hours. That's my vision of Illinois. We're the capital of the Midwest. This is a great place to live, and I am sick and tired of the Chicago Democrat machine who have pile-driven the economic reputation and our reputation generally throughout America and the world of this great state, the home of Abraham Lincoln and Ronald Reagan, into the ground. So I ask you for your support together, and we must do it. If you're independents, Republicans, this is all our state. We must make Illinois work again. Thanks for being here this morning.
Thank you, Senator. And Senator Brady.
I, too, am here to ask for your support, not just for us, although this election isn't about the four of us. It's about you, and it's about our children and grandchildren. Who best can lead this state forward? And I wouldn't be here today if I didn't think I was the best in that position, although I have a great deal of respect in many ways for these three individuals. And I will admit, regardless of the other discussions about Bruce Rauner's money, he was very generous in the last campaign, and I'm grateful. If you've got any extra, feel free to send it over today. And I am sure whoever wins, he'll be there to support them in that election. But ladies and gentlemen, to win, we need a candidate, I think, who's got bold ideas. We need a candidate who's willing to lay out a platform to eliminate the income tax in Illinois to move our state forward. We need a candidate who's willing to take a bold position on pension reform, saving our taxpayers $160 billion. A candidate who can work in a bipartisan way. Let's face it, I had hoped in the last election that we'd have a Republican-controlled General Assembly after I won, but it looks like it's going to be Democratic-controlled. We're going to need someone who can work across the aisle to push these initiatives, first by delivering support amongst the people and then the legislature. I've proven I can do that. We also need a candidate who can win. I've been tested, just like George Bush in Florida. Governor Bush told me the first time he had to run the first time and lose to win the second time. In big states, it's hard when you're unknown. And believe it or not, Jeb Bush was unknown in Florida. But he came back to build on that first track record and win. He lost by 60,000 the first election, I lost by 30. He turned around and won, and that's what I believe with your help I can do today. This isn't about Bill Brady or Kirk Dillard or Bruce Rauner or Dan Rutherford. This is about you, and it's about the future of our state. And I'm here today because I believe I have the bold initiatives to build a greater state, the greatest state in the nation. Thank you, and God bless you.
You're watching the Illinois Channel, an independent nonprofit corporation formed to provide gavel-to-gavel coverage of Illinois state government and other public affairs events taking place across Illinois.